On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the motor vessel ONE Henry Hudson has departed the port of Los Angeles. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, ONE Henry Hudson caught fire back in November of 2025. Very spectacular, happened in the port of Los Angeles. I did a live stream of it, and we followed the kind of efforts to get that fire out, the salvage. Well, now the vessel has departed, heading across to Asia for repairs. We've got some new information to take a look at, plus a discussion about what happens next regarding the cargo and what needs to happen to prevent this from happening again. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. So here's a story by Mike Schuller over at G-Captain. Fire damaged ONE Henry Hudson departs Los Angeles after 2-month salvage effort. So the fire-damaged ONE Henry Hudson has departed the port of Los Angeles for repairs in Asia, closing the book on what the Coast Guard officials describe as one of the most technically demanding salvage operations in recent port history. The vessel sailed from Yangze terminal last Wednesday, January 21st, after completing cargo discharge operations earlier in the week. The departure comes exactly 2 months after a fire broke out in the ship's lower deck compartments on November 21st, 2025. While the vessel was moored at the port. U.S. Coast Guard Captain Stacy Cressy, who served as incident commander, said the response evolved from an emergency firefighting effort into a complex, multi-phase salvage operation involving careful coordination across multiple agencies and private contractors. Salvage operations presented major logistical challenges, particularly in cargo hold number 3, which was estimated to be about 80% flooded from firefighting efforts. International salvage firm Don John Smith mobilized specialists from around the world to stabilize the ship, remove damaged cargo, and prepare the vessel for transit. At the height of the emergency, the incident forced a temporary closure of 4 of the port's 7 container terminals and prompted shutdowns along State Road 47 due to heavy smoke, though broader port operations resumed within days. All right, I want to take a look at a video just put out by the Port of Los Angeles that takes a look at the fire and salvage operations done. There was just an award ceremony at the port commemorating the first responders, everybody who took part in this evolution.
We are following more breaking news, this time from San Pedro, where crews have been battling a stubborn cargo fire at the Port of Los Angeles for several hours now.
It happened around 6:30 p.m. deep below deck on the ONE Henry Hudson.
23 crew members were on board. Everyone was safely evacuated. This is the container ship being moved past the breakwater because of the dangerous conditions on board.
Several agencies were out here fighting this fire, all of them coming out here with multiple resources.
On the evening of Friday, November 21st, we received a variety of calls related to a possible vessel fire on board the ONE Henry Hudson.
You don't hear those explosions on ships very much, fires on ship happening very much. First question is, anyone hurt? Emergency response had happened. We had evacuated the terminal.
So early on was identifying, what was burning, getting the right resources in the right place.
The role that the ILW had was making sure that the fire department, the Coast Guard, and the port police all knew what type of cargo was on there.
So there were about 2,850 containers, and each one had various contents to include hazardous substances. We also found out that the vessel had about 1 million gallons of fuel and oil products on board. So we used this analysis, we determined the safest thing to do was to move the vessel out to sea.
So the movement of the ship underway and getting it out of port is an extremely controversial decision made by the Port of LA. It was done for several reasons. Number one, they weren't worried about ship fuel fire, okay? The ship's fuel is in the double bottoms below the bottom of the ship. It's not going to burst into flames. That's not an issue at all. It doesn't matter how many millions of gallons of fuel on board. This is a container fire up forward on the ship. The issue here is that the container fire was smoking off and there was potentially hazardous material involved. And we'll talk about the cargo in question here in a minute. A lot of smoke bellowing out, and the decision was made to move the ship out to the anchorage. Now, this gave up something the fire department had, and that's a purchase point. They had aerial devices up onto the ship. They had water flowing on the ship. They were fighting the fire using their pierside apparatuses on board the ship. The minute they cast off, they lose that, which means you only have the shipboard firefighting systems and the fireboats. You also was a discussion briefly about using the ship-to-shore cranes to potentially offload some of the cargo. That wasn't done for a variety of reasons. One, I heard that there was a loss of power for some of the ship-to-shore cranes, so they couldn't either use them, or more importantly, you don't want to put an ILWU longshoreman suspended over a fire. I mean, you just don't. And so it's probably not a great idea to do that.
The LA pilots came out, local tugs within the port, and the fire department got their boats on scene, and the boat was escorted from Houston Terminal out to Anchorage G4.
When we were all discussing of why we should move it out of the port was for the safety of the community.
So Stacy Cressy is the captain of the port of Los Angeles, and Coast Guard captains of the port have absolute authority over the ports they oversee. It's a really insane level of control they have. I mean, literally, there's almost no one that can overrule them when it comes to decisions. So she was the incident commander, and it was her decision, her call, based on the information being fed to her, to go ahead and have that ship, cast off its lines and head out to the anchorage.
When those decisions were being made to move the ship out to sea, this was a complex incident that required coordination, training, and excellence from our first responders.
Okay, I can understand the mayor wanting to say something, but she has no authority when it comes to moving the ship. None, zero. I mean, nothing at all. But the mayor is responsible for the training and making sure that the fire departments, particularly in this case, the Los Angeles Fire Department, which was the primary fire service that responded to this call, was prepared for it. Although there was a story that came out afterwards. That talked about the fact that the Port of Los Angeles and the firefighting equipment on board some of the boats in question was not up to speed, and there were issues with the ability of some of the fire boats to respond.
There's jurisdictional things working alongside the Coast Guard, looking at the operator of the vessel, the terminal, the crew. And when you have these huge, large magnitude incidents like this, it's always nice to see when you get on scene, you recognize people right away.
It was very humbling and amazing to see how many people putting their pretty much lives on the line to protect others.
An incident of this magnitude, not one agency within the city can respond, mitigate, and recover from something like this. When you see something like this come together so effectively with an outcome that's positive, it's incredibly rewarding.
That night, everybody can be proud because everybody came together and did what they were supposed to do.
54% of our workers live within 5 miles. 73% live within 10 miles. Us being part of the community and us being part of the solution was a huge accomplishment.
You're just working with top-notch individuals who really care and really have a total understanding of the importance of getting these decisions right and being able to work together as a team. It was an honor to be a part of.
And moving forward, it's made us stronger. It truly has. I mean, the idea that this occurring here and what we were able to do just really demonstrates our ability to collaborate and solve any challenge that comes in the port.
So I want to thank all of those involved for your leadership, the coordination, and the efforts to keep everyone safe at the port and in the surrounding communities. Thank you.
So I really like that video. It does a great job. I would have liked them to have included a few more groups into that video, and particularly ONE and the crew from the motor vessel ONE Henry Hudson. I would have loved to see the pilots involved in there too. I think they had a really important role. I would have loved seen some of the firefighters, particularly those on the boats out there, on the fire boats, and the role they had. But again, you get what you get. I understand that. So I want to talk about a couple of issues that were not covered in that video, but are really important to understand. So first off, ONE Henry Hudson is about halfway across the Pacific. She's just northwest of Hawaii right now, heading for southern China for a repair availability. They're going to determine whether or not the ship can be repaired. I assume it will be repaired. I can't imagine that damage is such that the ship will not be repaired. So three major things we got to talk about. Number one, the cargo on board. What happens to the cargo on board? So ONE has set out a series of customer advisories. This is the most recent one, which discuss about the sailing of the vessel. But the one I want to focus on is number 7. So number 7 deals with the issue that's really important, and that is general average. So if you don't know, general average it's an old-timey thing on ships, and it's been around forever. It goes back to the concept back in the day of sail, where you're sailing across an ocean and you have to jettison some cargo because of stability issues or wind or something, and you start throwing cargo off. Well, the person whose cargo is thrown off loses. They have no cargo. Well, the idea was you would average out the loss across all the cargo on board. And so if your bales of cotton were thrown overboard, but somebody else's bales of cotton weren't thrown overboard, everybody shares in the loss. So you will basically recoup some money from it, but some of the other cargo will pay for it. That's the idea of general average. Well, in the case of ONE Henry Hudson, they declared general average. So they have appointed a general average surveyor. That is Ken Shortall, over at TMC Marine. The GA surveyor has begun to arrange cargo surveys, which is expected to commence on January 14th. Customers who intend to join are urged to contact the surveyor directly to coordinate the joint survey as soon as possible. You don't have a choice whether to be part of this or not. Your cargo is going to be included in it. However, if you want to be involved in the survey, then you have to contact them. Once the containers are discharged and cleared from the general average security and salvage security process and from any other cargo hold requirements, respective import and export cargoes will be arranged. Now, everything has been offloaded, the vessel. So cargo that was imported into LA will be held at the Houston terminal for pickup based on their bills of lading. Cargo that was going to Oakland was the next port that the ship was heading to, can be picked up at LA, or the containers will be shipped up to Oakland via rail. Cargo that was being exported will continue to be arranged for shipment. In other words, it's going to go on another either ONE ship or one of the ships in its alliance system. ONE is fully cooperating with the relevant stakeholders and will keep customers updated. They have a hotline right there, a 1-844 number you can call, and there is an email address that you can use. So if you do have cargo on board the ship, strongly recommend you follow up on that to do it. The second issue has to do with the salvage and how that fire was put out. So this was an image released by the U.S. Coast Guard. This shows you hold number 3, and you can see the vessel's hold basically became a very deep swimming pool. The way they extinguished the fire that was happening below deck was to flood the vessel. Now, that tells me a couple of things. Number one, if you're going to flood a vessel like that, stability-wise, it's not an issue. You can put all that weight in there. You're not going to break ONE Henry Hudson. In fact, I said that during the initial fire, that you can flood the entire compartment and put it out. The problem with flooding an entire compartment like that is now that water is completely contaminated. You can't just pump it off. You have got to treat every last pint of that water. That is a massive salvage problem. That is an issue that needs to be addressed. I don't know if you needed to fill that hold 80% to put that fire out. Was fire burning that high up in all the containers? Was there concern? There may have been. I don't know. But I've talked to some salver experts, and they kind of question this decision. And again, I hate the Monday night quarterback. I wasn't on the ship. I don't know the details that Don John Smith has, but that seems a bit extreme because it did delay the process for cleaning the vessel and adds a lot of money to do the cleanup of the vessel. It goes to another issue here. What caused this fire? Okay, I know what caused the fire. I do. I really do. Because I've seen the images, I've seen the pictures, which unfortunately I can't share with you right now, but I will once I'm allowed to. It was container loads of spent lithium-ion batteries. That's what started this fire. There was a very early image of popping down in the hold, and there was reports of explosions. Okay, it's not the ship. The ship didn't have an explosion. There's nothing that's going to explode down there in an empty cargo hold. Nothing. Yeah, there's electrical conduits that could pop and everything, but not the level they had down there. These were containers with lithium-ion batteries, either used or damaged lithium-ion batteries. And my good friend Patrick Durham over at Stash Training talks about lithium-ion batteries, especially on ships, all the time. And this is a fundamental problem. The transporting of hazardous cargo, like lithium-ion batteries still below deck, is an issue because when those batteries, for whatever reason, popped off and you started getting these thermal runaways, there's this kind of cascade runaway on board, you're not putting that fire out. Even if you submerge it in water, you're not going to put that fire out because it generates its own oxygen. What you're doing by submerging it in water is preventing the expansion, the spread of it from happening. And that's probably why they flooded that compartment, because it probably wasn't just one container. There were probably multiple containers of that down there. And that was probably the concern they had. Because if you're worried about a thermal runaway on a car, on a Tesla, on any electrical vehicle, when you have container loads of lithium ion batteries and they're experiencing thermal runaways or they're damaged and they start burning, that is a major problem. You have got to do something about it. The last thing I want to talk about is the National Transportation Safety Board. This is the NTSB site on the investigation on board ONE Henry Hudson. The event was on November 21st. Here's a brief little summary. Let's go to the docket. Nothing. This docket for this investigation has not been released. I want to know why NTSB has not even put out a preliminary issue yet. And I'm not alone in some of these issues with the NTSB regarding marine investigations. Back in the summer of 2024, we had a tugboat, the Miss Peggy, that was run down in the port of Houston. Here's the NTSB report. This is from over a year and a half ago. Here's the docket. Nothing. We have the Mexican training ship, the Cuauhtémoc, in the port of New York that struck the Brooklyn Bridge back in May of 2025. We have the NTSB investigation right here. We go to the docket. Nothing has been released. There were fatalities on Miss Peggy. One person died. There were 2 people who died on the Mexican ship. I'm not faulting NTSB for doing a thorough investigation. I want a thorough investigation. I want an investigation. I understand investigations take up to a year at some points. However, when we know what the issue is, and in this case, it's lithium-ion batteries on board the MV ONE Henry Hudson, you should put a report out that immediately that we suspect the issue is this. Take due diligence in loading this. We've had a series of fires on board ships. Maersk had a fire on a ship off the coast of Africa. We had a car carrier catch fire south of the Aleutians that got lost. The ship had to be abandoned. These are critical safety issues, and we need to be addressing them. And I'm asking the NTSB, please, 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 you put so much attention on the aviation side. You come out with interim reports very quickly. We need to do this on the maritime side. You need to address this because there are mariners on board these ships who are at risk at times, and we need safety concerns addressed immediately. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit the super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. Until next episode, this is Sal. Sign off.